Christmas Eve was a busy time for the Sodder family, preparing everything for the holidays and for the new year, which was almost at their doorstep. But the story of the West Virginia family is as mysterious as it is heartbreaking, having family members going missing in the middle of the night. Jenny, the wife of George Sodder, was woken up about half an hour past midnight on the first day of Christmas. The caller asked for a person who didn't live at the house and laughed in a way that Jenny found unusual. On the other end of the phone, Jenny could hear glasses clanking and laughter in the background and thought it was some drunken man at a party, before she hung up and returned to bed. But it wasn't long afterwards where she was awoken by a loud banging sound coming from the roof. She didn't think much of it and went back to sleep. It was 1:30 a.m. when Jenny woke up for a third time, but this time it was from the smell of smoke and fire. In a hurry, she woke up and managed to escape the house together with her husband and with their 4 children, Marianne, Sylvia, John, and George Jr. George attempted to use both of his trucks in order to drive closer so that he could climb on top of them and get into the attic window, but neither of them would start, even though they were working perfectly fine the previous day. The father, George Sodder, barefoot tried to climb up the wall and managed to break open one of the attic windows, cutting his arm in the process. He and his sons rushed to get the ladder in order to reach the second floor from the outside and rescue the 5 remaining children from their room. However, the ladder, which usually rested against one of the sides of the houses, was missing. Next, the family tried to call for help. They couldn't use their home phone, so Marianne had to run to a neighbor's home to call the fire department. Unable to rescue the rest of the children, all the Sodder family could do was sit and watch as flames tore apart their once beautiful home, and in less than an hour, the house was reduced to mere ashes. For unknown reasons, the fire trucks didn't arrive at the house until 8 in the morning, hours after the house, with some family members trapped inside, burned to the ground. All they could do is perform an official investigation, which resulted in the conclusion that the missing children had undoubtedly perished in the fire, which was caused by faulty wiring. After looking through all the ashes, they didn't find any skeletons, and after asking a local crematorium if it's possible for a house fire to leave no skeletons behind, she got a surprising answer, that usually the bodies are burnt at a very high temperature for at least 2 hours, and even then it's possible for bones to be found. This was less time than it took for the house to completely burn down. Jenny led a personal investigation. She started burning chicken bones in the oven for almost an hour, but the bones remained intact. And George had heard about a house burning down, but the bones could clearly be seen. The answers revealed that it was almost impossible for the skeletons to actually fully burn, for all 5 missing children leaving no traces behind. It just didn't make sense. George and Jenny started to find evidence that pointed away from the official investigation statement. One piece of strange evidence that they came across was that of a driver, who had claimed that he saw fireballs being thrown at the house. Together with what Jenny had heard that night, the thud from the roof, could imply that the fire was not a result of faulty wiring, but was actually started intentionally. One of the strangest and most heartbreaking evidences comes from a woman who had clearly seen a car, having all 5 missing children driving by as the fire was still burning. Another strange incident was that of a waitress who had served breakfast for 5 missing children on the morning of Christmas, 50 miles west of Fayetteville, but couldn't recall other details, including how the adults looked. Taking the evidence with them, Jenny and George Sodder went directly to the police station and demanded that their case be reopened and the fire be further investigated. The police refused and stated an official investigation concluded that there was no crime involved. They didn't take no for an answer and continued investigating for themselves. In the next several years, George would dig through the ruins to find any trace of evidence. A few bones and an inner organ were found, but tests showed that the organ had actually been cow liver. Some say that it was planted there to cover up the shady police work. It was reported that the 4 pieces of vertebrae and 2 small bones possibly belonged to a child's hand had been found. A medical expert involved in the case stated that it would be very unlikely for all the other remains to be destroyed in such a quick burning fire. The expert believes that the remains came from a 14 or 15-year-old child, which would match Maurice's age. George didn't believe that these were his son's hands because of the location that they were found. Years later, after more bones had been tested, another expert stated that the remains belonged to a person between the ages 16 to 22, and the bones had shown no signs of being damaged in the fire. Some think that the bones had been placed there from the nearby graveyard as a cover-up, but there's still no evidence to support these theories. The couple believed that their children had been abducted and that the fire was started in order to cover the tracks of whoever kidnapped them. They put up a billboard in their old house with the photos of the 5 missing children and a $5,000 reward for anyone that could return the children safely, to no avail. No one has ever returned their children, but one day in 1968, Jenny got an envelope in the mail having a picture of a young man whom she thought was one of her children. On the back, Quote, Louis Sodder, I love Brother Frankie, little boys, A90132, end quote, was written, but no return address. She hired a private investigator to track down the possible sender, or even the young man himself. But once the investigator had left West Virginia, no word was heard from him ever again. The 1968 photo was the last piece of evidence that they could find. George Sodder died 1 year later, in 1969, and his wife, Jenny, died in 1989. The children were sadly never found.